The playlist are in the description box below. This is one of the Painted Photographer's decoupage papers that was in last year's Maker's Box by Sonnet's Garden Blooms. And this mold I poured using clear resin, and it is from IOD's Cloche's mold. I'm tracing around this little ornament because I'm going to decoupage this onto the back of the cloche. I added a little bit of detail using some Mod Podge and glitter just to show off some of those snowy areas. Once that has dried, I'm going to apply some Mod Podge to the back of the cloche, not the front, but the back of the cloche. And I'll be adding that decoupage paper to that Mod Podge. I cut it a little bit shorter than I thought I did, so I did add that little strip to the bottom. And then I sealed it in with more Mod Podge. So that the colors would really pop on the front, I painted the back with white chalk paint. The details on these cloches are really beautiful, so I'm going to accent those using some gold rub and buff. And I'm just using an old paintbrush, and I'm adding it to the top little finial and also the bottom part. Once this was dry, I hot glued a ribbon to the back of the ornament, and this project was ready to be hung on the tree.
I will keep you warm as soon as you remove that snow. Whatever we do, we will be alright. These holidays.
If you haven't ever used IOD's Angels Tapers molds, you really need to consider purchasing these. I used clear resin and poured all three of these Angel Tapers ornaments that I'm going to use for ornaments, and I want you to look at the detail. They're just absolutely gorgeous. I chose one of these angels and I painted it with a coat of black chalk paint on the front and the back. Now I'm going to go in with some of this teal paint, and this is just acrylic paint, and I'm just dabbing it on in different places. The idea is to make this look like it is iron and has been sitting out in the weather. Once that's dry, I am taking some of Dixie Belle's Patina paint, and this is in the iron metal, and I'm dabbing that on in places as well. Once that first coat is dry, I go back again and try to dab in those same places because the patina spray needs to be applied to the wet patina paint. Now this is the Dixie Belle Patina spray in green. Once I have sprayed these areas that I have painted with the patina paint, I'm going to set this aside and let it start to rust. It's really a cool process. Now that it's dry and it has rusted, I'm going back with a little bit of that gold rub and buff, and I'm just brushing that on the details just to highlight them. This is probably my favorite project that I have ever done. I did glue a little hook to the back so that I could string through a velvet ribbon and hang it on my tree.
I will keep you warm as soon as you remove that snow. Whatever we do, we will be alright. These holidays.
I got these little wood ornaments at Michael's, I believe, and I'm going to be painting them with Blue Pine by Fusion, front, back, and sides. These are some rub-on transfers from IOD's Kitschy Christmas, and I chose some that would match this particular blue. Each set of transfers comes with a transfer tool, and you just gently rub along the backing paper, and that transfer will transfer right onto your project. It's always a good idea to kind of burnish it in with the backing paper, and then you have the perfect little look. Now I'm going to embellish these a little bit more with some of the gilded transfers from 2024. I'm just using bits and pieces and scraps just all around the transfer that I've already applied. Once I have it like I want it, I just moved on to the other ornament, and I think they turned out darling. I did seal these in with some DIY liquid patina, and then I added a velvet bow, and these were ready for the tree.
That you're missing, I will keep you warm as soon as you remove that snow. Whatever we do, we will be alright. These holiday
I'm using some of those same type of ornaments in the last project, but I'm giving these a coat of white chalk paint. While the chalk paint is still wet, I'm going to be applying a paint inlay by DIY. This is the Delft Blue from 2024, and I'm going to spritz it with some water and then place it down onto that wet paint. And I'm going to set it aside and let it dry completely. I did the same thing with the second ornament and applied another inlay and set it aside to dry as well. Once they were completely dry, I brought them back and I spritzed them again with some water, and I let them sit for about 30 seconds, dabbed off any excess, and then I pulled away the backing paper. I set these two aside and let them dry, and then I sprayed them with a clear sealer.
that you're missing, I will keep you warm as soon as you remove that snow. Whatever we do, we will be alright.
These are clear ornaments that I got on sale at Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to be painting one side of the ornament with fusion paint encasement. So I'm actually painting what will be the back side of the ornament, and I will be painting two of these. Once the ornaments were dry, I turned them over and I applied some liquid patina to the front side or the clear side of the ornament. I'm going to be applying two more of the Delft Blue IOD paint inlays to the top of the patina. Again, I did spritz these with a little bit of water before applying them. With the liquid patina, you don't want these to dry quite as long as you would with chalk paint, because liquid patina will set up and will harden, as you can see here. But I did spritz it with water and I pulled back the paint inlay. I had to work at it just a little bit, but it did work, and I was successfully able to remove that paper.
That you're missing, I will keep you warm as soon as you remove that snow. Whatever we do, we will be alright. These holiday
First project, I'll be using part of the Christmas Wishes stamp. I'll be using the Santa Claus right here at the top. This is a flowered sackcloth from Dollar Tree. It's very, very thin, and I'm going to be cutting a square to fit into this little embroidery hoop. I'm using a black ink pad to ink up the top part of Santa Claus because that's the only part that's going to show on this project. And then I'll use a baby wipe to go around the edges and be sure that I haven't gotten any ink on any of the others. I just left my Santa Claus on this backing sheet since that's the only part I'm going to be inking up. Now I want to check and be sure that everything shows like I want it to. Decided I didn't like the color of this hoop, so I used some fusion paint and painted the outside of the hoop in Everett. So spray painted the inside hoop white, and that's so that it won't stand out so much once I get this piece of cloth inside. Tightened the embroidery hoop until I had it nice and tight, and I gently pulled the fabric to make sure there were no wrinkles. Then I trimmed off the excess with some fabric scissors. I did trace around the hoop on some watercolor paper because I do want to put a backing on this piece. I added a little dot of hot glue at the top just to hold that fabric down, and then I added hot glue around the hoop in sections so that I had time to get my paper in place before the hot glue hardened. Now that the backing is on, I can go back and trim off any excess threads or paper. Since this is going to be an ornament, I added a white silk bow to the top for my ornament hanger, and then I tied a small white bow to add after I get the greenery on. I used some scrap pieces of greenery and some red berries and glued those in place. Now I'll add my bow on and then trim it down to fit. Look at all the little details included with the snow globe mold. For this one, I did use resin again, and I chose to use this little church in the woods that was included with the snow globes mold. I'm going to be painting the trees with some fusion paint, and I chose fusion just because it already has a top coat in it and everything. So I'm going to paint all my little trees with Everett paint by Fusion. Give the trees a little bit of dimension. I went back in with another shade from Fusion Paint and just added in some shading. Once those have dried, we definitely need some snow since it's a snow globe. So I started just adding snow to the tops of the trees, and then I decided to go ahead and add it down the branches as well. I used Victorian lace by DIY to paint the snow on the bottom and the church as well. I'd go back with one more light coat on everything so that I could sprinkle on some glitter on top of that snow. I let that dry completely, and then after I had poured my resin, I pressed this piece down into the resin. I let it sit for about 30 minutes before I pressed this down into the resin. I just forgot to hit record on that. So the next day, once everything is set up, I went and I painted around the edges with Everett just on the top part. And you may notice here that the snow globe doesn't go all the way around the top. I think I just must not have poured enough and I didn't notice it didn't pour into that section, but that's okay. It was symmetrical, so it was fine with me. As for the bottom of the globe, I painted it in coal black by Fusion. I'm going to be adding gold onto this, and the gold always looks better when it's over black. I used some white wax on the greenery part, and then I chose to use gold on the black part. The white wax has settled in there. I go back with a paper towel and wipe away any excess. I used a fan brush and brushed gold gilding wax to the black paint. It was all said and done. I decided to go ahead and brush that gold around the greenery part as well. Show you what I use for my ornament hooks. These are little silver glue-on pendant holders for jewelry, and usually I set them down in the resin before it's set, but you can also use UV resin after. I'm going to be using this little church and this snow globe, and I'm first tracing around the snow globe on just regular copy paper, and so that I know exactly where I want to stamp my little church. I want it to show there at the top, so I'm drawing those little lines so I know exactly where to put it. Now I'm inking up my stamp, and I'll use a wet wipe to wipe away any excess that I have around it so that doesn't transfer in the wrong spot. Then I'll place my stamp down on to the area I want it to show on the snow globe and rub gently. I cut out my church so that it would fit onto the back of the snow globe, not worrying about fussy cutting around the edges. I used Waverly chalk paint and ink and painted all around the edge of the snow globe. I then took that gold gilding wax and a little makeup brush, and I just brushed it on all around the snow globe to highlight all of those beautiful features. I am careful to offload my brush just every now and then to make sure that I don't have too much wax on it, because I don't want it to fill in all of the cracks. You can see I got a little bit on the actual globe, so I just went back with a wet wipe and wiped that back. I used DIY's liquid patina to decoupage my paper onto the back of the snow globe. I wanted to be sure that it looked right from the front, so I just held it up gently and pressed it into the back. And of course I didn't get it exactly right on the back, but I just lifted it up, then gave it a coat of Mod Podge. The sheet music that I'm going to be using on the back is actually pretty thick, and I think Mod Podge works better for this. And I just cut it to fit on the back. Again, not fussy cutting, I just wanted something to cover up the back so that it would be cohesive. And then I added another coat of Mod Podge. This is the gilded transfer from last year that I was referring to that I used on the other project. I'm also going to be using it on this project. So I'm looking for a word that will fit nicely onto the front of this, and I chose peace. All IOD transfers come with a transfer tool, and I used this one on this gilded transfer, but I heard someone say the other day that like a wooden popsicle stick works better on these gilded transfers. So as I was doing this and it wasn't transferring as quickly as I wanted, I went ahead and used the popsicle stick, and they're absolutely right. Use a popsicle stick for the gilded transfers. I don't know what it is, but somehow it works much better and much quicker. Round, I'll be using these other little pieces of wood as well. I'm staining the wood round with a little bit of Waverly Antique wax mixed with water. Stain both the front and the back. I started out staining this little wooden Easter egg, but I do end up going back and painting that in just a minute. I then went over the Easter egg with Sandy Blonde. Wood round was from Dollar Tree, and it did have a hole in the top, so I'm using this green jute twine, and I'm going to thread that through the hole as a hanger. Now using Tite Bond Quick and Thick, I'm gluing on the Easter egg, and I'm also adding just a dab of hot glue as well to give it an instant hold. As you may be able to tell, this is going to be a little reindeer, so I'm going to add a red nose, which is actually a red berry for Rudolph's nose. I started out drawing on some eyes using a black Sharpie, but I did go back and used a black paint pen instead. Once I got that colored in, I went back with a white paint pen and put a little dab to make the eyes sparkle a little bit. Now I'm using wood glue to glue on these little wood twigs from Dollar Tree as his antlers. Now I would recommend taking care with this because, as you can see, one fell off, so make sure your hot glue is nice and hot and then hold it in place until it sets. To jazz it up just a little bit, I embellished it with this little piece of greenery that I had in my stash. Going to be an ornament. This is a little Tart tin that I took outside and spray painted black, and I did drill a hole into the top and use that same green twine to add a hanger. I traced around the Tart tin to get a fit for the inside so that I could use this vintage sheet music. Used a simple glue stick to glue this to the center of the Tart tin. This is some tinsel that I had in my stash, and I'm just snipping off a piece and I'm going to hot glue it to the bottom. And then I'm also going to be adding the tree, the reindeer, and these little ornaments. I'm just trying to get my placement. Once I know where I want everything, I'm going to use my hot glue and start gluing things in place. I did end up cutting down that back leg so that it would fit much straighter in that Tart tin. And then I hot glued it in place along with the tree, followed by the ornaments. IOD cloche molds that I had on hand. I'll also be using Sonnet's digital press and the milk paint that was in this box. It's Little Red Wagon. Now, these digital prints are so beautiful this month, and I wanted to use Santa Claus. So I printed it out on my color printer, and I cut out the picture that I wanted, and I'm using some of that liquid patina, and I'm painting it onto the back of the mold. We're going to decoupage Santa face down onto the mold so that you can see him from the other side. Now I'm using that milk paint in Little Red Wagon, and I'm painting over the details towards the bottom of the cloche. While that dries, I'm going to carefully paint the back with, this is Fusion Paint. I couldn't see the name of it there, but any kind of white paint will work for the back. You do want to make sure the back is white when you decoupage so that those colors really show through. So I'm going to paint the back with this paint and let it dry. I took it outside and gave it a coat of clear gloss spray paint on the front so that that resin really looks clear. It looks a little hazy before you do this. Now I'm taking some of the gold rub and buff, and I'm going to accent those features that I painted in red as well as the top of the cloche. Now, to make the back a little more attractive, I'm using this piece of recycled decoupage paper from Sonnet's Maker's Box last year, and I'm just going to use some liquid patina and adhere that to the back of the cloche and cut away or sand away the excess. And isn't he lovely? Jumbo popsicle sticks. I'm just mixing together some paint with a little bit of water to make more of a stain to make a gingerbread color. Once I have that color like I want it, I'm just going to stain that popsicle front and back and then wipe it back with a paper towel. Depending on the age of your kids that you're working with, you could do this ahead of time. I chose 3 buttons. It would be better if the red ones were a little bit smaller, but I just used what I had. And I'm just kind of getting my placement of where I'm going to want these on the gingerbread man. Now I'm using a black paint pen and I'm just drawing on the eyes and the mouth. I'm using puff paint here. Again, you could use a white paint pen, you could use markers, you could use whiteout, a white color, anything like this, depending on the age of the kids. And I'm just adding on some icing at the top and the bottom. I also have a little ribbon here that I've tied into a bow. This is again a step that you could do ahead of time. I'm adding a little bit of glitter to the white puff paint just to give it a little something. Just for the sake of time, I'm using hot glue to glue my pieces on, but for younger children, I would recommend using school glue or tacky glue and then setting them aside to dry. Johnny wants a pair of skates, Susie wants a doll, Nellie wants a... In order to hang these, I just used a piece of jute twine, tied a knot, and then again glued that to the back. Isn't very bright. Choose for me, oh Santa Claus, what you think is right. Jolly old Saint Nicholas, lean your Popsicle project, I'm using one jumbo popsicle stick and one a little bit smaller, and I'm going to be cutting the ends. I didn't really measure it, you can just kind of eyeball it, but about in thirds. This one will be a toy soldier. So I am adding these two to the sides, and then I'm going to use the middle piece across all three sticks so that it will hold them together. And again, I would use school glue or tacky glue and set it aside to dry and then come back to it later to paint. I mixed together some paints to make more of a flesh color, and I'm painting the hands and I'll paint the face.
Christmas Eve is coming soon. Now you dear old man, whisper what you'll bring to me. Tell me if you.
I forgot to hit record, but I did paint the shirt next, so you can kind of see how I did that. And I also painted the hat, his belt, and his shoes with black paint. Now I'm painting his bottoms, and then we will add something to the shirt. I used some yellow paint and just made an X and some dots on his top.
Wants a pair of skates, Susie wants a doll, Nellie wants a.
All that's left is to give him a face, and again you can use a marker, a paintbrush, a paint pen, anything that is fitting for the age of child you're working with. Now we're going to add another hanger to the back, just like we did with the last project. I didn't realize until I turned this over that I probably should have painted the back just to make it look a little nicer, but that is totally up to you.
Jolly old Saint Nicholas, lean your ear this way. Don't you tell a single soul what I'm.
This project, I'm using some of these little tags that I got on clearance at Dollar General. So these were literally pennies a piece. I chose one, and I chose the one with the gray tassel at the bottom, and I have some white beads on hand, and I'm going to draw a little snowman face onto one bead and then his buttons on the second bead. We'll also need one black bead for this project. I cut off the string at the top because I'm going to be adding some jute twine. I threaded through my jute twine and then I tied a small knot.
I will be the shortest one, you'll be sure to know.
I'm going to thread on the bead that I made the buttons on first, and then follow it with the snowman's face and then the black bead.
Christmas Eve is coming soon. Now you dear old man.
Once all three beads have been strung onto the twine, I'm going to tie a knot at the top to keep them from sliding up and down. On the tag, the children could write their names or anything they wanted there. I chose just to glue on a little snowflake. I also put a dot of glue so that my beads wouldn't turn around, but that's up to you. Then I added a pretty little red velvet bow to the very top.
As for me, my little brain isn't very bright. Choose for me, old Santa Claus, what you think is right. Jolly old Saint Nicholas, lean your ear this way. Don't you tell a single soul.
We are going to turn this little witch hat and ghost into a Grinch face. First of all, I'm going to paint the rim of the hat with white craft paint. I'm going to paint the bottom of the ghost with some lime green craft paint.
when I'm fast asleep.
I also have a little half bead that I'm going to paint with that same green paint. Now you could draw on a nose, you could use a bead, whatever you have on hand. Set those two pieces aside to dry, and I'll go back to the hat and paint the top of it with red craft paint. Now we can glue these two pieces together once it is completely dry. So I just position my hat on top of the ghost so that we have a little Grinch face. I'm using tacky glue for this, and gluing that hat down, I'll use the same glue to glue on the nose. You could leave this as is, or you could draw on a face as I did here. My paint pen is almost empty, but I managed to get it on just enough. Lastly, I'm painting another bead with that same lime green paint.
Choose for me, oh Santa Claus.
While the bead dries, I'm going to go ahead and add a twine hanger to the top. Using more glue, I'm going to glue on the green bead to the tip of the hat.
Jolly old Santa,
How adorable is this?
don't you tell a single soul what I'm gonna say. Christmas Eve is coming soon. Now you dear old man, whisper what you'll bring.
The Holy Family using some tumbling tower blocks and some beads. First of all, I chose a smaller bead and I glued in part of a dowel that's pretty thin, but something that would fit into the hole. Again, you might want to do that ahead of time. Then I'm gluing the two tumbling tower blocks together.
Stockings you have
Now I'm going to string on two natural beads onto some jute twine.
be sure to know.
Once they're strung on the twine, I'm going to tie a knot at the end, and then I'm going to pull it so that the knot will hide inside one of the beads.
Christmas Eve is coming soon. Now you dear old man, whisper what you'll bring to me. Tell me if you can.
I added a little glue just to hold the knot in place. For this part, you may actually want to use hot glue, so definitely assist younger children. I glued each bead in place on the top of each tumbling tower block and held it until it was set.
Wants a pair of skates, Susie wants a doll, Nellie wants a storybook.
With the smaller dowel rod and the smaller bead, I went ahead and broke it off and then used some scrap fabric to wrap around it for baby Jesus swaddling. I used hot glue to hold it in place, and then I removed the dowel rod and added glue to it as well. A little more glue to the back and glue it to the front of the tumbling tower blocks, and then we have one more little addition.
Lean your ear
I have this little silver star, and I'm just going to glue that to the jute twine.
say, Christmas Eve,
What a sweet little reminder for the reason for the season.
whisper what you'll bring to me. Tell me if you can.
These are some of the acrylic tags from Hobby Lobby. I got them 50% off, and any of the acrylic tags or ornaments that you buy does have this film on the front and the back, so you do need to peel that off. This is an ornament rub-on transfer from IOD's Kitschy Christmas, and I thought this would just be perfect on this clear little tag, and it won't need much else. Once I have the transfer rubbed down, I do go over the transfer only with a little bit of liquid patina just to seal that transfer in. This will be perfect as a gift tag or an ornament to hang on the tree. This is also an ornament that I got from Hobby Lobby. It is plastic, and I'm going to be painting it with coal black. Once that's completely painted, I'm going back to that Kitschy Christmas rub-on transfer, and I'm choosing some of these to put around the ornament. So Santa Claus is going to go on the front. And then this holly leaf I will put on the back. I'm going to wrap this garland all the way around the ornament, but I am going to work in sections in rubbing that down so I can be sure and get it straight. Now that all my transfers are down, I'm going to seal it all in with Big Top. Now the paint, Fusion paint, does not need to be sealed, but the transfers do need to be sealed. So just so it has the same finish all over, I am sealing the entire piece with Big Top. For this project, I used IOD's heraldry mold, and I poured resin into the angel wing, and I painted it with buttercream by Dixie Belle. Now I'm taking a little bit of fine glitter, and I'm just sprinkling that by using my brush and adding that to the wet paint. That gives it just a little bit of a glimmer, and then I went over it with just a tiny bit of dry brushing in, I believe it was Gold Leaf by Rub and Buff. Once I get the paper in place, I'll add more Mod Podge to the paper.